While Don's trying to get his microphone working, can I just say, again, we have Harvey Weiner, National Commander of the Jewish War Veterans, on board, and it's a pleasure to have him here. He's a great person. He's been fantastic for the entire year. Thank you for being here, Harvey.
All right, it's 9:35, and I think we're going to get started. Unfortunately, Don was going to introduce Jack Jacobs, but I want to welcome everybody from South Jersey Men's Club and from Jewish War Vets from wherever you are. I believe most of you are New Jersey people, but welcome to our South Jersey Men's Club Zoom monthly meeting. As you all know, our speaker today is Jack Jacobs, retired U.S. Army Colonel and recipient of the Medal of Honor. And I know Don had a very nice write-up on Jack, but unfortunately we have no sound from Don this morning. So the only thing I can suggest to you, we gave you the link for Jack's Wikipedia entries. And after the meeting, go on there and read all about Jack. But in any case, Jack, we're thrilled to have you here this morning. And please, if you would.
I'll just throw some random ideas out there. Maybe it'll generate a few questions we can deal with later on. I don't know how much time we have, but I have about...
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry, Jack. Let me interrupt you for 1 minute. I skipped over Nelson being all excited about Don not being able to read his thing. But Nelson, could you take a minute, if you don't mind, Jack? Nelson was going to read from your citation.
Okay.
I'm going to unmute. Nelson, you've got to unmute yourself.
I should be unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
The Medal of Honor is the United States of America's highest and most prestigious personal military decoration. Colonel Jack Jacobs, Medal of Honor citation. It was issued on October 9th, 1969. For conspicuous gallantry and integrity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Captain Jack Jacobs, then First Lieutenant Infantry, distinguished himself while serving as Assistant Battalion Advisor, 2nd Battalion, 16th Infantry, 9th Infantry Division, Army of the Republic of Vietnam. The 2nd Battalion was advancing to contact when it came under intense heavy machine gun and mortar fire from the Viet Cong battalion position in a well-fortified bunker. As the 2nd Battalion deployed into attack formation, its advance was halted by devastating fire. Captain Jacobs, with the command element of the lead company, called for and directed air strikes on the enemy positions to facilitate a renewed attack. Due to the intensity of the enemy fire and heavy casualties to the command group, including the company commander, the attack stopped and the friendly troops became disorganized. Although wounded by mortar fragments, Captain Jacobs assumed command of Allied company, ordered a withdrawal from the exposed position, and established a defensive perimeter. Despite profuse bleeding from head wounds, which impaired his vision, Captain Jacobs, with complete disregard for his safety, returned under intense fire to evacuate a seriously wounded advisor to the safety of a wooded area where he administered life-saving first aid. He then returned through heavy automatic weapons fire to evacuate the wounded company commander. Captain Jacobs made repeated trips across the fire-swept open rice paddies, evacuating wounded and their weapons. On 3 separate occasions, Captain Jacobs contacted and drove off Viet Cong squads who were searching for Allied wounded and weapons, single-handedly killing 3 and wounding several others. His gallant actions and extraordinary heroism saved the lives of 1 U.S. advisor and 13 Allied soldiers. Through his efforts, the Allied company was restored to an effective fighting unit and prevented defeat of the friendly forces by strong and determined enemy. Captain Jacobs, by his gallantry and bravery in action, in the highest tradition of the military service, has reflected great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Nelson. Don, are you able to talk to us now? Now I don't hear you. If you're unmuted, I don't hear you. Jack, I think we better go ahead and get started.
Okay, here we go. So like I said, I'm just going to throw out some random things I think about and others think about. And I hope it'll generate some questions we can answer. We should give it, how much time do we have?
As much as you want.
Let me see what the time is now. Yeah, I got about an hour at the most. So I want to stop talking after about 25 or 30 minutes so we can take some questions. I've got a very digressive mind, so something I say might remind me of something else. And the older I get, the more digressive I get. So I apologize in advance. I'll talk very briefly about the Medal of Honor and the recipients of the Medal of Honor. When I was decorated, there were almost 400 living recipients of the Medal of Honor. I think the number was something like 380 or so. Today, there are 69 of us left. And even the young guys from this war are in their 30s and 40s, and some of them even older than that. So we're something of a wasting asset. We recognize that. So a few years ago, we started to get involved in education. And with a very small grant from, I think it was the GE Foundation, we developed a character development program for use in middle schools and high schools, which is available online from the Medal of Honor Society and Medal of Honor Foundation for free. And it includes everything, lesson plans, videos, and so on. And it's actually making a difference in the places where it's used. And it doesn't, the whole curriculum doesn't have to be used. You can mix and match, and teachers everywhere are using them, using bits and pieces of it. It includes videos of Medal of Honor recipients talking about concepts like patriotism and diligence, discipline, and so on. It was developed in conjunction with the Erie, Pennsylvania school district. And the reason it was in Erie was because GE insisted on it. So we'll give you the money. It was a very small amount of money. So we'll give you the money, but you've got to work with Erie, Pennsylvania. We're interested in Erie, Pennsylvania for two kind of related reasons. They said, first of all, we have a big locomotive manufacturing operation there. And second, it's, even though it's in where it is, it's really in the Rust Belt, and 85% of the kids in the public schools are at risk. And the union's objections notwithstanding, the entire Erie, Pennsylvania school district, both teachers and administrators, threw themselves after hours for free to put this thing together. And I remember after they tested it out, and I remember a video because they shot kids' reactions to the curriculum. And I remember this kid who was either late middle school or early high school with the curriculum in his lap. At that time, it was in a 3-ring binder. Like I said, now you can upload it or download it or side load it or whatever they call it. And this kid was a real gangbanger. I mean, he would have otherwise been bad news. And he looked at the camera and pointed to the curriculum and said, "I didn't know any of this." And then accusatorily pointed his finger at the camera and said, "Why didn't I know about this?" And it was very instructive about what our obligations are to succeeding generations to make sure that they know what we know. I mean, that's our job as grown-ups, that they have the education that we had, and that they understand their place in society like we did. And like I said, it was extremely instructive and motivated the Medal of Honor recipients to redouble our efforts in getting the program out to schools. Attendant to that, I'll just tell you an anecdote. The first dinner I attended was in Houston, and it was the day after the award ceremony at the White House. And they scheduled the award ceremony to coincide with the biennial get-together of the Medal of Honor Society, which at that time was over 300 people. And I remember President Nixon there were 4 of us from the Army who were decorated for different actions, but in the same ceremony. Astoundingly, 50 years later, all of us are still alive. And we're in the Oval Office, and he says, "What are you guys doing tomorrow?" We said, "Well, we're going home." He said, "No, how would you like to go meet the other Medal of Honor recipients?" Said, "Yeah, sure, we'd love to." Young kids. He says, "Take my plane, take my plane." And so the next day they piled us into the 707. It's the same aircraft that is currently hanging from the ceiling in Simi Valley, California, at the Reagan Library, because Reagan was the last guy to use that plane. With a 707, which back in those days looked really big, but when you go into it now, it's the size of my guest's bathroom. I mean, the whole thing is really small. In any case, we get there, and we got there in time to go to the gala that evening with all the Medal of Honor recipients who were there. And to give you a perspective of how long ago this was, and I'm talking to people who understand the passage of time, the guy who sat to my right at my table was Eddie Rickenbacker. There was still a living recipient from the Boxer Rebellion, a guy named Bill Seach, who conducted a bayonet charge on the Citadel at Beijing in 1900. And when the affair was over, he probably got this assignment because he was more or less my size. Jimmy Doolittle came over to me, put his arm around my shoulder, and took me into a corner of the ballroom. And he said, "I want to have a word with you, young man." I said, "Yes, sir." Jimmy Doolittle, holy mackerel. "Yes, sir, yes, sir." We go into the corner, and he, with his arm around me, quite firmly, actually, he said, "Let me tell you something." He said, "You're no longer Jack Jacobs." He said, "You're Jack Jacobs Medal of Honor recipient, and you better comport yourself accordingly. Do you understand what I am telling you?" I said, "Yes, sir, I sure do. I sure do." It was the notion that all of us still have, and that is that we are always a part of something much larger than we are. And we try to teach this to our kids and to other people's kids. And to the extent that we are diligent about teaching this notion, we make the country and the world a better place. And to the extent that we don't, we're falling down on our responsibilities. But there's no doubt about it. I mean, we all the recipients, if you talk to them, they'll tell you the same thing. We all feel the same way about our responsibilities. And all of us who've worn the uniform, I think, feel the same way about whether you've been decorated or not been decorated, that you have a responsibility as a representative, having served, of having been part of something larger than you are and requiring you to comport yourself accordingly. With respect to the medal itself, somebody once asked Bob Kerry, I think you know who Bob Kerry is. He was the Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam, lost his leg, Navy SEAL. Not to be confused with John Kerry, a completely different person altogether. And he became governor of Nebraska and was senator from Nebraska for a couple of terms. And somebody was, I think from the Times, was interviewing him many, decades ago and said, "What does it take to get the Medal of Honor?" He says, "Well," he says, "you have to do something. People have to see it. They have to be able to write, and they can't hate you. Those are the 4 requirements." When you think about all the millions of people who fought in combat and who were valiant in combat, which is, by the way, most of them. There were lots and lots of people who were valiant on my day, and nobody saw it. or people saw it and they themselves were killed, and nobody was left to witness it. Or they did write it up and accidentally, or in many cases on purpose, the paperwork wound up in the garbage. Ted Rubin is a good example of the latter. If we have time, I'll talk to you about Ted. But and you realize that you're wearing the award not for yourself, but for all of those who can't. And if you ask any recipient, he'll tell you exactly the same thing. We all feel that way. Well, enough about that. I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the state of the military in this environment. Now, first of all, let me just tell you, you're looking at somebody who believes in universal service. I think if you're lucky enough to live in a free country, you owe it something in the form of service. My father was at the University of Minnesota studying electrical engineering when they dragged him and everybody else kicking and screaming out of class. I think he had like 6 weeks to go or something before he was going to be graduating, to go into the Army. And he served in the Army in the South Pacific, in New Guinea, and the Philippines. Hated getting dragged out of the Army, out of school. Hated the Army, hated the bureaucracy, hated getting shot at. I mean, I don't know who does like getting shot at or any of that stuff. And the instant he had an opportunity to get out, he did. After the war was over, hated it. And yet, when he got to be our age, all he would talk about was how proud he was at having saved the world. And if you look back and I see Woody Goldberg, who's been a friend of mine for 50 years. Woody, you don't look it, man. You don't look it. We'll tell you the same thing about our generation who served. There's this mistaken notion that the large majority of people who served in Vietnam were dragooned into the service. That's false. Statistically, the majority were volunteers. Now, admittedly, some of them volunteered so that they could get their choice of assignment, which eventually wound up being Vietnam in any case. So that didn't work very well. But the same thing happened, that all these people who were dragged kicking and screaming into the service during the war in Vietnam, against their wishes, sent into combat and so on. And now that they're 75, 80 years old, all talk glowingly about what they did for their fellow soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, and how proud they were at having worn them. Maybe it comes with a little bit of maturity, and maybe there are other factors at work, but we are a nation of patriots when things get really difficult, and we have to make sure that we do our part to reinvigorate the next generations with those notions of patriotism. But now we're in an environment in which we have an all-volunteer force. And like I said, you're looking at somebody who believes in universal service. I think everybody's got to serve. But there's no political will to get it done. And there's something to keep in mind here. I don't know if it's troubling or it's not, but it's certainly an interesting intellectual exercise. More people were killed in New York City on 9/11 than were killed at Pearl Harbor. A place, by the way, nobody knew where it was at the time, unless you were in the service. And even then, probably only in the Navy. More people killed in New York City on 9/11 than were killed at Pearl Harbor. And yet, on the 8th of December, 1941, hundreds of thousands of young people streamed out to reception stations to go volunteer, to go defend the Republic. That did not happen on 9/12. Indeed, and by the way, I'm totally apolitical. So, I'm an equal opportunity castigator. The President of the United States said, go back to your homes. There's nothing to see here. Indeed, he said, go to a shopping center and spend some money. Because we've got this volunteer force and they're going to take care of everything. But think about it. What we've done is outsource the defense of the Republic to a very small number of young men and women who are willing to do it. I'm not happy with that. And it has a lot of logistical implications. So think about it in terms of, and we can get back to universal service because, like I said, I've got a digressive mind. It makes me think about how difficult it is to defend this country of 330 million people with an extremely small number of people in uniform. By the way, statistically, most Americans do not know anybody in uniform. I mean, that's very troubling. Now, if you take a look at the Army, we can call a division of 17,000 people a division. We can call a division of 12,000 people a division, or 10,000 people a division. I remember after, when I was a major, I was a battalion executive officer in the 7th Infantry Division, which was a round-out division. So it had a whole brigade that was in the reserve components. A lot of the support were in the reserves and so on. And so the division, actually, the active force part of the division was like 8,000 or 9,000, but we called it a division in any case. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you call it. You just need the right amount of combat power in the field to defeat the enemy. But the Army, though it's increasingly equipment-centric, is basically a people-centric organization. Not so the Navy. The Navy is an equipment-centric organization. So forget about a carrier task force, just an aircraft. An aircraft carrier generally has a component of about 5,500 sailors. Now you can run it with 5,500, and I'm making these numbers, after the numbers I'm going to say now, I'm making up, but I don't know what the real numbers are, but it's just the intellectual process that's worth thinking about. You can run it with 50, you got to run it with 55. You can run it with 5,000. Maybe you can run it with 4,800, but you can't run it with 4,799. At some juncture, I mean, it's a binomial system. You can just run it with so many people. You may have duplications in some military occupational specialties. You may have a critical military occupational specialty, and you got 3 people who got that MOS, and they get sick, and you're through. That you can't run the ship at all. And the Navy is finding this out right now. The Air Force to a lesser extent, but it's also equipment-centric too. So you've got a big problem with the defense of the Republic, especially when we're projecting our power, when we're trying to defend the Republic at a great distance in the Western Pacific, in the Gulf, and in other places, and we're using the Navy and the Air Force, and we run out of people to operate the equipment. That's a very dangerous situation. It's something to think about. I think we need to think about it in conjunction with the notion that we all have to do something for the country. But you should know by now that I'm not particularly happy with the idea that we have an all-volunteer force. They're fantastic kids. They're dedicated, they're hardworking. Some of them take 2 years to get qualified in their military occupational specialties. We're damn lucky to have them. We don't have enough of them. And the requirement to defend the Republic is extending only to these brave young Americans. And I'm not particularly happy with that. Woody and I met when we were both teaching in the Department of Social Sciences at West Point almost 50 years ago. And luckily, I'm still up there poisoning cadet minds. I teach in the fall semester money and banking, and in the spring semester mass media and American politics. In the first instance, the kids who are majoring in economics, in the second instance, the kids who are majoring in American politics. It is enormous fun, still is after all this time. And the kids are, as always, top quality kids. In the middle of this pandemic, what is the military academy doing? Well, the kids are coming back there. I mean, a lot of them are back there already. The plebes are there. The first classmen who are supervising the plebes are there, and so on. And they're all, believe it or not, social distancing. What are they doing with classes? Well, professors have a choice. They can either teach in person, in which case they'll have to be socially distanced. And if you only have 15 kids in your class, it's easy to do. Or you can do it online. And if you've got 60 kids in your class, you have 2 choices there. You either do it online, or you split it up into 4 or 5 separate classes, which means you have to teach it 4 or 5 separate times. So not surprisingly, a lot of the classes that are core courses that have a huge number of cadets in, they're being split up and they're being taught multiple times. The electives, those of us teaching electives, we have the luxury of getting online and talking to the kids because we know most of them in any case. But this is the military academy at West Point, and you can control the process there. So the kids are there, they're all locked up, they're not going anywhere, right? But if you go to some place like NYU or Penn State, they're not locked up. But the kid goes downtown and gets a pizza and comes back and fills the place full of COVID-19 viruses. There's no control over the population there. Now think about universities. This is sort of off-piste here. If you talk to some of the people at the top of the food chain at some of the major educational institutions, think about the problems that they have now. First of all, an enormous percentage of the revenues that flow into large-scale universities in the United States come from overseas students who pay full freight, who are now not coming to the United States. I mean, these are kids who go to a university where the average kid in state is paying $20,000 in tuition. They're paying $70,000 in tuition, but they're not coming now. This causes no end of cash flow problems. So that's the first big problem. Second problem is the control of the population, as I just described. They can't do that. The third problem relates to money as well. So think about a university like NYU. Tuition at NYU, $70,000, that's $70,000. And one of the reasons you pay that much money for a place like for $70,000 or for other big name institutions, Notre Dame and so on, you pay big tuition. The reason you pay that is so that you are going to school at that university. So you're going to Notre Dame. So you're going to college in New York City. That's why you're paying that huge amount of money. Well, you can't say, pay me $70,000 in tuition, and by the way, stay in your garage in Keokuk, Iowa, and take classes that way. Nobody's putting up with that stuff. And so they've got a double problem with revenues, the universities, and they don't know what to do about it. As a matter of fact, many institutions have not yet decided what they're going to do, or have been passing on perhaps a bit of disinformation to their students, saying, yeah, come to school and you'll get your education in our institution. But what they're really going to do is they're not taking classes in class. They're going to take them from their dormitories, and they're going to take them online, but they haven't told them this yet. So watch this space. See what happens with the educational process in these circumstances. I can tell you, having taught classes towards the end at both Rutgers on the one hand and West Point on the other, at the end of last semester, that you can do it online. Of course, the educational process is not nearly what it is when you're in the same room as these kids. If you work really hard, you can get it to be almost as good. But the independent variable is being able to work really, really hard. And the question is whether or not sufficient numbers of educators at our institutions are willing to work hard enough to make the process online almost as good as it is in person. We don't know. Switching to something else, I want to talk a little bit about economics in the circumstances we're in right now. Our single biggest trading partner is Europe writ large. Our second biggest trading partner is China. Both of them are in bad shape for a wide variety of reasons, having to do with the pandemic. Where it's going, I don't know. It's interesting to note that the Dow and other markets are up, or they're not up substantially. They're about where they were when the pandemic started. There's a number of reasons for this, not having to do anything with economics. I mean, our GDP, we're going to continue to have a succession of quarters when our GDP is going to be low. We're going to have negative growth for some time. Certainly as long as the pandemic's going to last, and we may if we do this again this time next year, we may be talking about coming out of it then. And even if we are at that time, that will have been a severely truncated pandemic. If you remember what pandemics were like in the past, in history, I mean, the Black Plague actually lasted a couple of centuries. There was the initial influx of the problem. Then after about 40 years, after what, a third to a half the population of Europe died, it went down asymptotically, not to zero, but close to zero. And then 100 years later, it popped up again. Spanish flu in 1918, 50 million people died. And then it sort of dissipated. And then that was 1918. In 1920, 2 years later, it popped up again, double noted. We will also have a double noted pandemic, but severely squeezed, thank goodness. It may not last as long, but it's probably, every epidemiologist you talk to says we're going to have more of it. With respect to and we may have some experts here among the crew. I am not an expert on any of this stuff, but I do talk to people who know what they're talking about, who are involved in developing vaccines and so on. A coronavirus is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to produce a vaccine that prevents infection using a coronavirus. When you get a head cold, that's a coronavirus. There are 400 different viruses that cause head colds. And one of the reasons people our age don't get head colds so much anymore is because we've been exposed to almost all of them. And I'll probably scotch it by saying this, I haven't had a head cold in 4 years. That's because I've already had like 380 head colds in my life, and so have you. Do you know of anybody who's produced a vaccine for a head cold? No, which is a coronavirus. Hard to do. But and for a number of reasons, one of which is that they mutate like crazy, really, really easy. These are extremely simple organisms. They're not even living organisms, but they're extremely simple organisms, and they mutate very, very easily. But they're working very hard on it now. And there are some, if you talk to some pharmaceutical operations, they're already in human tests now on some things that look promising. But promising is not good to go. And it's going to take some time before it's good to go. And remember this, we all go and get the flu vaccine every year, don't we? Because we don't want to get the flu. And the reason we have to get a new one every year is because it's mutated. The one that you're going to get this year is going to be like every other one, 70%, only 70% effective. And this is not a coronavirus that they're working on. So it's nice to be optimistic, but you've got to be realistic about whether or not we're actually going to have a vaccine that's going to solve this particular problem and how long it's going to last. To get back to economics, one of the principal reasons the Dow is where it is has nothing at all to do with the state of our economy. Our economy is in quite difficult straits and will continue to be difficult and may even get a heck of a lot worse before it gets better. But one of the reasons Dow's where it is because people like you and me are not the people who are the large-scale investors in the markets. Principally, they are program traders. So the computers making decisions based on algorithms that are produced by people, but by and large, the large-scale volume that you see in the markets is principally the result of program trading. So if the program sees an opportunity, then it's going to go in, the price goes up, and so on. Here's the bad news about markets, and we've all been alive long enough to see good markets and bad. By the way, just to put everything in perspective, where is it now? Almost 27,000? We are all old enough to remember when the Dow broke 1,000. I think Richard Nixon was president of the United States. I think there was a banner headline at the top of the New York Times that the Dow broke 1,000. And it stayed by and large near 1,000 for a long, long time afterwards. Now it's 27 1,000 is the Dow. The economy is much, much bigger, but also because most investors, including machine investors, are naturally long the market. Things have a tendency to go up at a market pace, but when they come down with a vengeance. When it's going to happen, or even if it's going to happen before things get better, nobody knows. Otherwise, the Dow wouldn't continue to be where it is. But do not think that the economy is in particularly good shape just because NASDAQ and the Dow are doing really, really well. That's nothing or very, very little to do with that. I want to throw out something very briefly about I don't know how many people are, I know some of you, if not many of you, have military experience. But I want to throw out something for us to think about with respect to how we fight now. And then I'm going to shut up and take questions. The large majority of people who have been killed and wounded since 9/11 have been killed or wounded as the result of improvised explosive devices. I don't know what the numbers actually are, but my guess is I'd be willing to bet that that's true. They've not been because we have not been fighting, certainly in the beginning stages, the way those of us who fought in combat remember fighting in combat. Now, why is this so? I mean, why is it so that people get blown up by improvised explosive devices? I know the answer to this, but to me, it's quite troubling. And this is why. One of the things we learn as young soldiers is that you are never to go down a road or a trail until you will have secured the road or a trail to the maximum effective range of your weapons, to the front and to the flanks. That is to say, if you don't know what's on that road, then you send the smallest possible force, and you don't send it down the road or a trail, you send it to the flanks, because the road or the trail is probably going to be covered by a mine or mines. There are bad guys lying in wait to ambush you and so on. And yet, the majority of people killed or wounded in the last 20 years have been because we didn't do that. Now, the people who are responsible for making sure that we don't do that have a lot to answer for. But the next time that we do fight in earnest, we have to make sure that the people who are running things understand that you don't just go down a road or a trail for logistical purposes until you will have secured it. We make sure at West Point and in ROTC, because I teach at Rutgers as well, make sure that we teach this to kids who are going to become young officers and ultimately high-ranking people at the top of the food chain who make decisions. They need to make decisions based on what they would have learned back when they were young kids. I tell kids all the time, we all do, don't ever forget where you came from. Don't ever forget the things you learned as a young soldier, because when you get to the top of the food chain, because if you do, you'll make mistakes that you will ultimately regret. All right, enough of that. That was my soapbox sermon for today. I'd really like to answer some questions.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate all your comments on current subjects. Wasn't what I was expecting, but was very welcome.
What were you expecting?
I wasn't sure.
Oh.
I'm not sure we were sure of what we were expecting.
Okay,
but
I didn't
anyway,
want to disappoint you now.
No, I'm not disappointed at all. I have one question. I have a few here. A couple came in on chat. I'll start with the first one, and then I'm going to take questions from the floor after these few that came in early. This one is from Len Berman, one of our members. Are the armed forces loyal to the president because he's the commander-in-chief, or to the Constitution and the people? President Trump has indicated that he may not leave office if he thinks the election is rigged. Can he call in the troops to keep him in power? How would those under his command respond?
Well, I don't think that you would find very many people in uniform. I mean, the law of large numbers says that you're going to find anything anywhere, even in small numbers. You're not going to find very many people in uniform today or any other time who would say that they are serving the president, that instead that they are serving the Constitution. They take an oath to say that, and they believe it. And I have not run across anybody in uniform who thinks otherwise. We really do have great kids. And by the way, they're all kids to us. I mean, if they're under the age of like 65, they're all kids. And if they're over the age of 65, they're not in uniform anymore. No, they're dedicated to defending the Republic, and they'll do the right thing. They'll always do the right thing. And don't forget this, you can always, as a matter of fact, we encourage people at all ranks, not only that they have a right to tell the commander, I'm talking about their immediate commander, what they think, but they have an obligation to do so. They have a requirement to tell the when they're about ready to go on a mission, and you get the mission statement, and you got to put in your 2 cents up and down the chain of command. But once the order is given to you, unless the order is immoral or illegal, you carry it out. We've all been on operations that we thought were ill-conceived, but you know, when you're at the bottom of the food chain, you get to vote all right, but you certainly don't understand. You're not capable of understanding the larger picture. There have been lots of attacks I've gone on I thought were really bad ideas, and some of them were really bad ideas. But I didn't realize that when my unit was making the attack, that we were making the main attack for the brigade, which was making the main attack for the division, which was making the main attack in the entire corps. And if we didn't take that hill in front of us, the units on our left and the right didn't have a chance. So it's usually a function of where you sit. But I've not, and I run across a lot of people in uniform. I've not run across anybody who would do anything other than defend the Constitution. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I have two more, I think, that came in early. Mike Perloff, one of our members, I tried to Google a picture of President Nixon presenting you with the medal and putting it around your neck, but could not find it. Do you have any idea why I couldn't find it?
No idea. I mean, I've had people send me screenshots of it for me to autograph it and mail it back to them. So it is extant. I can tell you that. I don't know where to find it, but it's because I don't go looking for it, but it's out there. There were 4 of us in the picture. The best picture, there are a couple of snaps that were taken on the platform. There was me, Bob Patterson, Special Forces Sergeant, who's now a retired Sergeant Major, a guy named Jim Sprayberry from Opelika, Alabama, was in the Army for a while and then got out and went into business down in, I think, real estate business in Alabama, and a guy named Pat Brady, who was a dust-off ambulance helicopter pilot who had, I think, 3 helicopters shot out from under him that day, who retired as a 2-star general. As an aside, I can tell you that I thought he was really old. He was a major in the United States Army and a helicopter pilot. He was really old. He was 33. I mean, I thought he was an old guy. I was 24 or something like that. I thought anybody 33 has got to be like close to death. But the pictures there with Nixon and Stanley Reeser, who was Secretary of the Army, and Melvin Laird, who was the defense secretary. And all of us look very much different in this photograph than we. I can tell you something about this ceremony. It gets me to thinking, as a matter of fact. What was really astonishing about the ceremony itself was not the ceremony, was not about being in the White House and being with the president and all the rest of that stuff. The really fascinating thing was not even being at the White House. But don't forget that nowadays the president calls up the potential recipient and they have a conversation, and the whole thing is set up months in advance and so on. I was a company commander down at Fort Benning. My company clerk, a guy named Crescencio Alvarez, who had been a refugee from Cuba. He had like 3 PhDs or something like that. Anyway, he was my company clerk. This is the draft army back in those days. He said, "Hey, sir, there's some colonel on the phone, wants to talk to you." Now, colonels don't talk to captains, I mean, you know. And it's not a joke, can't be a joke call, because back in those days, phone calls actually cost real money. So I pick up the phone, this guy says, "Hi, I'm Colonel Schmedlap." I don't know what his name was. He says, I'm in charge of Army Awards Branch. I'm telling you the entirety of the conversation. He says, "Congratulations, you're going to receive the Medal of Honor. And later on, one of my people are going to call you up, and they're going to make arrangements with you for you and your family to come to Washington so you can get the award. Congratulations again. And don't tell anybody except your family about this out here," and hung up the phone. That was the whole conversation. The whole conversation. Not long after that, some major called up and made the arrangements, logistical arrangements for us to go down to Washington and get the award. And these conversations were like a week or 10 days before the ceremony. But what was really astonishing about the whole thing was not all of that. I actually don't remember the ceremony much. But what's really fascinating was we went out to the Rose Garden where the ceremony was from inside the White House. The 4 of us, plus the president, plus Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army, and an Army colonel named Coffey, who was President Nixon's military aide, and walked out where the platform had been erected and mounted the platform. And there were people as far as you could see. It was a brilliant morning in Washington, and they had opened up the White House grounds to anybody who wanted. They'd given off the people in the old executive office building. If they wanted to, they'd come and watch the ceremony. Had opened up the gates of the White House grounds. Anybody who wanted to watch the ceremony, come and watch the ceremony. Tourists, homeless people, terrorists, anybody who wanted can come and watch the ceremony. And that's what astonished me the most. The sea of people. I couldn't even see the fence around the White House grounds because there were too many people there, even from up on the platform. And my enduring memory was coming out of the White House and seeing all these people in the bright sunshine. And of course, you can't drive down Pennsylvania Avenue anymore. You can't go anywhere near the place anymore. But those were very much different times. And even a time when, you know, we're in the middle of a very, very unpopular war, and you would, no, it's just open up the White House grounds, fine, come on in. Anyway, so I've run on interminably. I'm ready to take another question.
I have one more that came in early, and then I'm going to open it up for the floor. This one's from Dr. Kenneth Hartman. Jack, it's a great honor to listen to you. Short of a draft, what can we do to encourage more high school seniors to enlist into the military after high school? By the way, recruiters are now reporting that a high number of high school enlistees are withdrawing from their decision to serve due to pressure from outside groups like BLM.
Well, everybody's got a role in all this. I think we as parents and grandparents have to do our part. We're responsible citizens, and our responsibility does not end with doing the right thing ourselves and for ourselves. We have a responsibility to our communities. We're part of a community, and so everybody in every community has to do a much better job to inculcate in succeeding generations the same values that we value ourselves. Otherwise, we will have wasted all of our time. Otherwise, all the people who served before us, their service, whether they came back or worse yet, if they didn't come back, will have been in vain. So it's not incumbent upon somebody else. We have to do our bit. So that's the first thing, I think, and perhaps the thing that will work the best to instilling in people the kinds of notions that keep us free. I think we all have a responsibility to do that. With respect to the draft, I mean, we don't have the political will to have everybody serve. but I think at some juncture, we'll be able to generate it if we all do our part. You know, I'm not on any social media. I think it's a load of rubbish, but everybody else is. And I think if you can have a groundswell of opinion to think X as a result of social media, you can have a groundswell of opinion to think 1 divided by X, to think Y, to focus our attention on instilling the right values in people. I mean, the mechanism is there to get it done. The question is, what are you doing with that mechanism? And if the answer is, well, nothing except entertaining myself, then you're wasting your time. Your children are wasting their time. Your grandchildren are wasting their time. And the service of all the people who sacrificed before us will have been in vain. With respect to how you do it logistically, and then I will shut up, assuming that we did have the political will to do it. When you talk to people who are thinking clearly about whether or not how we can have service, everybody says, well, you can't do it because what are we going to do with an entire cohort of 18-year-olds for 4 years or 3 years or 2 years? I mean, the draft used to be for 2 years. When Woody and I were in uniform, the draft you got drafted, you were in for 2 years. Well, you don't have to bring them in for 2 years. Think about what we're trying to accomplish with the draft. We're not trying to have a large standing army, are we? We're trying to reinvigorate notions of being part of something larger than yourself. So this is not the only solution, but try this on, assuming that we had the political will to do it. College starts in January. When you're graduated from high school or you turn 18, whichever it happens to be, you go into basic training, 10 weeks of basic training. Everybody. You're missing an arm? I've got a basic training for you. Everybody goes. And you go through the same 8 to 10 weeks, you throw hand grenades, you low crawl in the mud, you get yelled at by some drill sergeant, you go into a barracks and you do all this Mox next stuff. And at the end of 10 weeks, you're graduated from basic, 10 weeks, you're graduated from basic training, and we give you a pair of boots and a uniform as a memento of your national service. And then we say, get out of here. We don't want to see you again ever. Goodbye. Go home. Goodbye. Now, let me tell you 2 things happen as a result of this 10 weeks. First of all, I am telling you, we would have to have convened boards to determine whom among the people who want to come on active duty we want to keep. That's the first thing. I don't know what we spend on recruitment now, probably $5 billion, $10 billion. I don't know what it is. We would redirect that in order to train these people. Probably net would be zero. It wouldn't cost us any more to do what I'm talking about than what we're doing now to try to convince people that, yeah, I'm going to go, and then they change their mind. But we'd have to, I'm telling you, we would have to convene boards to determine whom among the people who actually want to come on active duty, people who never would have thought about doing it before, we want to keep. The second thing that happens is an outgrowth of what I mentioned earlier about my father and other people of our age who got dragged into the service. They'd get to be 75 years old and they'd sit around talking about how proud they were at having served. There'd be all these stories about guys in my platoon and girls in my platoon. Let me tell you, you think that's a story? Let me tell you about this girl in my platoon when she was throwing a hand grenade. And more to the point, you go into a bar, assuming that anybody ever goes into a bar again, in a country where now we don't have anything in common. We don't even vote in common. A higher proportion of people in Iraq votes, a place where you get shot if you vote, than votes in the United States. We would have this in common. Everybody, the bartender, the girl you're trying to pick up, the guy who just got thrown out of the bar for having drunk too, everybody, the Uber driver you're taking home, everybody would have this in common. We all would have worn the uniform for at least that 10 weeks. We would all have something in common. Now, that's a solution, but at the end of the day, it doesn't work unless there's political will to do it in a country in which more people in 9/11 were killed than were killed at Pearl Harbor. Anyway, I've spoken enough about the draft.
Jack, tell us how much time you had so that I can kind of.
Let me take a look at my calendar. Well, I've got 10 to 15 minutes at the most.
All right, let's, for those who have questions, if you click on the word participants and click on the raised hand icon, I will be able to see that you have a question and I will recognize you. Or you can keep waving your hand at me and I'll cursor through the participants and find you that way. So let me see if I can find someone with a question.
Don't feel obligated, by the way. Ask your question.
I'm sure there's going to be questions. Mike Perloff, can you unmute yourself? I might have to unmute you. I saw you a minute ago, and well, hold on one second. Let me find you this way.
You know, among all of us, there's probably zero technical expertise on how to operate this little phone thing here.
Well, I'd like to think there was a 1 out of 10 anyway. Anyway, Mike, I think if you unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks again. I'm sure for the first time you've ever heard this. Thanks for your service. And how has being Jewish impacted on your career, your military service, or anything like that? I have to have a quick aside, which is that a person I knew who is a Jewish in the Russian army in Afghanistan told me that you had to make sure that nobody knew you were Jewish because you always had point if you were Jewish.
Well, not so in my experience. I think Woody might have been there some years ago when I was doing the baccalaureate at the Jewish chapel at West Point. This is quite some time ago already, maybe 10 years or so ago. Spectacular chapel, by the way, which Woody was heavily involved in getting it done. If you haven't been up there, you got to go and go to the chapel. It's just absolutely magnificent. And in any case, after the baccalaureate, a bunch of the first classmen who were about ready to graduate and become lieutenants said, why don't we have more Jewish cadets here at West Point? And I said, I don't know, do we have an insufficient number? And they said, yeah, we don't think there are enough. And of course, they didn't know how many there were, really. And they didn't know what the percentage, to make a long story short, and I don't know what the numbers are now, but at the time, the percentage of cadets at West Point who were Jewish was almost exactly the percentage of Jews in the United States. And it's probably still about the same. But I mean, some other people may have had some difficulty, but nobody ever gave me a hard time. I was the boss in any case. You can't give me a hard time when I'm the boss. My father, on the other hand, during the Second World War, he was a gymnast and a boxer, and he had to defend himself all the time. By the time I came into the Army, there were only remnants of anti-Semitism. I don't see any now, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Thank you, Jack. I'm going to cursor through here if looking for hands. Harvey Weiner, unmute yourself if you would.
Yeah, hi, Jack. I am the National Commander of the Jewish War Veterans, and I'm also a Vietnam combat veteran. I was a Phoenix guy down in Fort Worth in 69 and 70. And my question to you has to do with your notion of the universal military service. I have thoughts on a similar line, but having believed that many people are not suited for military service, I believe more in universal national service, that some people are better suited to help the nation through national health, the Peace Corps, or other type of national commitment that is not military service. And I wonder what your views are on that particular aspect of my thought.
Well, if your assumption is that the objective is for everybody to have the same experience, so we have a common experience in service, then that won't work. It just won't work. And by the way, who makes the decision on who goes in, who gets to crawl through the mud and who gets to empty emesis balls and or sweep the floor in a hospital. No, I don't think that works. Then you have the same thing you have now. The only people who are going to go into the military to go do the 10 weeks of crawling through the mud are going to be the same people who would otherwise volunteer to do it. No, I want everybody to have exactly the same experience. Like I said, you're missing an arm, missing an eye. I've got a basic training for you. Because if you do it any other way, it becomes an arbitrary distinction, an arbitrary decision about who gets to fire weapons and who mops the floor in the emergency room. No, I think you got to force people to, everybody does it. Everybody lives, everybody is born, everybody dies. Everybody wears the uniform for 10 weeks. I think that's the only fair way to do it.
Thank you, Jack. Nelson, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Well, Mike basically asked my question, but you did mention the Tibor Rubin and the situation he went through for discrimination. Did you want to expand on that and talk about that for a few minutes?
I'll do it as fast as I possibly can. Well, Ted Rubin was now deceased, was recommended 4 times for 4 separate incidents during the Korean War for the Medal of Honor. He managed to get freed by the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment from Mauthausen concentration camp. He was 15 years old, and he swore that if he survived, it was just because you got freed from just because the Allies came and freed you didn't mean that you were going to survive. Everybody was starving to death and had disease and so on. But he said, if I survive, his whole family was destroyed. He was from Budapest, and he said, if I survive, I am going to come to the United States, and I'm going to pay the United States back by becoming a GI Joe for saving my life. And sure enough, in 1948, he came to the United States. Didn't speak not a word of English, spoke Yiddish and Hungarian. That's what he spoke. There's a long involved story, but he managed to cheat his way into the army. He failed the qualifying test first because he couldn't speak, copied the answers from guys around him who were complicit in letting him do that, and wound up in the army, found himself in the Korean War. Was a POW after he'd already done 3 things for which his fellow soldiers recommended him for the Medal of Honor, was then again recommended for the Medal of Honor for action in the POW camp, where he snuck out and stole guards' food and brought it back. I mean, he was offered to be released because he was originally from a communist country, right? He's from Hungary. And the Chinese communists, he refused, absolutely refused. He said if you got captured, and he was badly wounded when he was captured, it's the only reason that he didn't die in the act. He said you wanted to get captured by the Chinese, you'd probably die en route to the POW camp, probably die in the POW camp. But at least you had a chance. If you were captured by the North Koreans, they'd shoot you on the spot. In any case, he was in a Chinese POW camp. He was recommended 4 separate times, and his first sergeant told his fellow soldiers and him, after he had been recommended a couple of times for actions, they made him go on a detachment left in contact. Those of you who know what that is know that's really bad. It means you're going to die. You're out protecting the flank of your retreating buddies, and you're going to die. And he managed to protect the flank of the rear and flank of his buddies, and he managed to survive even though he'd been wounded and so on. His first sergeant said, no son of a bitchin' Jew is ever going to get any award in my company. Break, years later, I wind up going, it's the only ceremony I went to at the White House other than my own. I went to Ted Rubin's ceremony. There was a guy who was in a wheelchair, one of his buddies from his unit, one of the guys who had recommended him. And he was crying his eyes out and pointed across the East Room where the ceremony, pointed across the East Room at Ted, crying his eyes out and saying, that man saved my life. And I talked to others of his buddies who re-established the recommendation 50 years after the fact, when they got together for a reunion, say, hey, whatever happened to Ted Rubin? No, you know, I recommended for the Medal of Honor for this. I recommended. And said, well, whatever happened to it? No, he never got anything. And while they still could, they wrote out witness statements and got it all started again at 55 years after the fact. And Ted Rubin got the award, and he's gone now. Great, absolutely a great guy.
Do you have time for one more?
One more.
Okay. How about Selena? Can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, hi. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Jack for an excellent presentation. Very well informed. I enjoyed it. Selena Kanowitz, I'm a retired Master Sergeant from the United States Air Force, presently Senior Vice Commander of the Department of New Jersey. And
Thank you.
You're welcome. Desert Storm veteran. My job was NCOIC of Radiology and 7 other units. I would like to know, do you feel that there are more females joining the military now? Because when I joined in 1977, they were just opening up to females. And I think that they're deserving of more respect now because they're taking on combat roles and more difficult positions. Am I correct in that?
Well, there are lots more women now. I have to say, as a disclaimer, my wife is a retired captain in the British Army. So she tells me what to do, and I do it. So I understand how the chain of command works. I mean, I was a colonel, she was a captain, she outranks me. But there are lots more women in a wide variety of military occupational specialties than there were certainly years ago. And to go back to West Point, and in ROTC, the same thing is true. A larger and larger percentage of cadets in both programs are women for a wide variety of logistical, but also sociological reasons. I was talking with somebody some time ago about the change in what happens in the economy when women. I mean, so lots of downside to women joining as full-time economic participants in the economy. But one of the positive things that happens is you double the size of the economy. I mean, that's exactly what happened. One of the independent variables that's made the economy as big as it is now is because women have largely joined the workforce. There's a lot of downside too. I mean, it's very, my daughter, who's 56 years old, she had to make some decisions. Am I going to stay at home and raise my kids, have kids and raise my kids? Or am I going to become an investment banker? Or am I going to try to do both? The latter is really hard to do, but everybody has a decision to make, and the decision that you make is one of the independent variables that decides exactly what happens in your family, but it has a positive impact on the economy. It has a very positive impact on the military establishment. So yeah, there are lots more women. I think women at West Point, I'm making these numbers up, but I may be close. There used to be 0 when I was there, 73 to 76, 0% women. Now I think it's in excess of 20% of the cadets at West Point are women, and going up.
That's good. That's great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
And one last thing, they have a tendency to finish much higher on both the academic order of merit and the overall order of merit than men do. So I don't know why that is. We men are just focused on one thing, I guess, and women are not.
They're more diligent.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, among the best students in my classes are women.
Thank you so much, Jack. I can't tell you how much we appreciated your presentation. Not what I thought it was going to be, but
me neither. It's not what I thought it would be either.
Much better than what I would have thought, whatever I was thinking. But in any case, I want to thank you also for your service. I want to let you know that the club will be making a donation to your charity in the amount of $180.
Thank you.
Which is Cento Amici, which is a 501c3 organization that award scholarships to, I believe, high school and college students from New Jersey. I'm sure I'm thinking what many of our members are thinking this morning. If we could get you down here live when this is all over, we would love to have you.
Well, if I'm still alive when it's all over, we'll do it.
Well, I'd like you to keep that in mind, and I'm going to hold you to that. Let's hope that spring or next summer might be a good time. But in any case, thanks again. For those people who are on with us, if you're going to leave us, we are going to have a short membership meeting. If you'd like to stay, whether you're a member or not, please do. If you're not a member and you'd like to join us in the future, you can go on our website. It's sjmclub.org and leave us a message about membership. And I have a few other things that I'd like to discuss if I could. And Jack, if you're still with us, thanks again. I don't know if Don, if you're with us, I don't know. Let me see if I can find you. I don't know if your sound is any better now than. I don't seem to be able to find Don. Let me try it again. No, I don't know if Don's with us. But in any case, I know he was going to say something about fantasy football, and I guess I'm going to ask him to send it out by email. I think we're up to 14 teams. I'm not positive. I know we were trying to get there. But if you are still interested, look for an email from Don in the near future. I wanted to mention, in fact, I'm going to let Nelson do it. Nelson, if you can unmute yourself, could you tell us a little bit about the masks that you were able to obtain and how we disposed of them? Let me see, I might have to unmute you or not. Nelson? Let me
No, I think
there he is. Okay, go ahead, Nelson.
Okay, what we received from the Veterans Affairs through HUD is 500 masks. We, at the executive board level, we decide that the best thing to do is to distribute these masks through the kosher Meals on Wheels, through the kitchen that we have in the local area. So tomorrow I'm going to drop off most of the masks at the kosher Meals on Wheels, and they're going to distribute to their clients as well as to their staff. I will keep some extra. If anybody that's a member of the South Jersey Men's Club or the Jewish War Veterans need masks, they're in packages of 5. Send me an email. I'll either get it to you physically or I'll send it to you through the mail. Again, we figured the best way to go was actually to distribute to the community the masks and to let them use them and distribute them the best way they feel appropriate. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Nelson. A few other things. I wanted to mention, I know a couple of our, I see Don now. I don't know whether, let's see if I'm going to ask him to unmute and see if we get any sound from him. You're unmuted, Don.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Wow, I've been waving, trying to talk. I don't know if Jack is even still there because I did want to point out, and I don't know if Nelson had mentioned it, just a couple of things. That in addition to the Medal of Honor, he won 2 Silver Stars, 3 Bronze Stars, and 2 Purple Hearts. And he was also inducted into the New Jersey Hall of Fame in 2016. And I want to give him a plug because I read his book, If Not Now, When? And I could highly recommend it to everybody. It's a joy to read. It's a serious book with a lot of funny things, and he has a great sense of humor. So I'm happy at least to get that out. And if I could just mention on the fantasy football, we do have 14 teams, but if you're interested in still getting involved with it, if you would let me know today, and either I'll try to hook you up with somebody or I will start a waiting list. And if we get enough people, I would consider forming another league. But we do have 14 teams. So I I even combed my hair for Jack's introduction.
It looks very nice, Don.
Thank you.
Your hair. I also wanted to mention, and if someone else wants to chime in after I'm done, we have a couple members that I believe are either in the hospital or just leaving the hospital, and I want to wish them well. I know Myron Miller has had quite a bout. I think he's been in and out of virtual. I believe he's still there. I want to wish him well. And Dennis Satinoff has also been in and out of the hospital for at least, I'm going to say, the last 2 months, and I wish him well. I don't believe either one of them has COVID. They've got other issues, but hopefully they will recover, and maybe we'll see them at a live meeting in the spring or next summer. I don't think there's going to be any live meetings this year, but you never know. I guess we keep our fingers crossed, and maybe we get a vaccine and things start looking up. I'd like to recognize people from the floor. If you can put your hand up, wave at me. I'm going to have a look here and see if there's any hands up or any people waving at me. You know what? I see Dave Singer waving at me. So I'm going to say something about Dave. And Dave, I don't know if I just lost you for some reason. But anyway, I saw you waving at us. So it looks like you're doing better or well. I'm glad to see that. But again, I'm looking for hands up or waving. Hang on one second. Stanley Levin, would you want to say something? I think you can. I don't know if you're on with sound because I don't see any. I don't see any sound for you or any opportunity to unmute you. So I'm assuming you're not on with sound. So Rob Sachs, I believe you're waving at me. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Rob.
Good morning. First, excellent presentation. If you're still listening, thank you. God bless you and stay well. I did get an update on Myron Miller. He's at Lionsgate now, getting rehab, and it definitely was not COVID. He's suffering a battle with cancer, but he is at Lionsgate if anybody wants to send him a card. His wife has not even been able to see him since he got transferred. But that's the update on him. We're all saying a prayer for him. He's a great guy. Great meeting, and everybody stay well.
Thank you, Rob. Anybody else? I'm looking for hands waving. Dick Knopf, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, guys, I just want to let you know, David Singer is currently in Abington Memorial. I don't know if you saw a picture of him earlier, and he's having a gallbladder operation. So let's all wish him well. I think he's going to have it in the next couple of days. So just wanted to mention that. He's gone through some tough times, and of course I had mine out 50 years ago. So it's one of those organs you can live pretty well without, but I just thought I'd mention it.
Thank you, Dick. I'd like to mention dues again. If you haven't paid your dues, you've gotten an invoice. If you would either use our website, which is very easy to do, or mail us a check to Stan Schumas. His address was in the dues notice. I'm going to look for other people with hand waving. I see Stanley Levin waving his hand, but I don't see any way to unmute you, Stanley, for some reason, and I don't know why. Let me try something. I don't see how I can unmute you. I'm sorry. I do not see how I can do that. So let me see if anyone else, Ken Hartman, yeah, unmute yourself if you would and introduce yourself. I don't believe you're a member.
No, but I'm going to be.
Okay.
Thanks, Nelson, for inviting me. And again, as I'm a member of the Jewish War Vets, and was very, very happy to bring my good buddy Woody into the, thanks to Nelson, I knew Woody would be well received. He's a great guy, just over in Philadelphia. For those of you who don't know Woody was the chief of staff for General Haig when he was, General Haig was also chief of staff when General Haig became Secretary of State Haig. So he and Al Haig were very, very close, very close, obviously very, very close. And he's a good friend. He's also a CASA, very actively involved with the Army, and he's just a really, really great friend to all. And as Jack indicated, he's very much involved with Jewish Chapel at West Point. He's one of the big leaders of that. I just wanted to tell you that on Tuesday evening I'm hosting a career fair for veterans. It's actually a career job readiness fair. So if anybody knows of anybody who is a veteran who has been affected by COVID, they've lost their job, it's free. We've got some of the biggest corporations in the country that have agreed to come on for an hour. And again, it's not bring your resume. It's more about how do you search? How do you write a resume? How do you use LinkedIn to look for a job? It's free to all. It's Tuesday evening at 8:30 Eastern time. And if you know anybody who's interested, have them just go to americasalutes.us, and sign up. It's free. And I just wanted to thank you again for hosting Jack. He's been, I've admired him on CNN and other shows over the years. And it was a real honor to spend an hour with him. And thank you very much for including me today.
Thank you, Ken. If you need any information about the membership, our website, sjmclub.org, or email me, eestein43@gmail. 2 E's, STEIN, like in a beer mug. I'm looking for raised hands or people waving. Give me a second. Let me see if... Art Korth, if you could unmute yourself. Investment Club, you need to unmute yourself, Art.
He's looking for it.
It should pop up on your screen somewhere. There you go.
Hi there.
There you go. Go ahead.
Okay.
You're Art, excuse me, Art, you're over my
meeting immediately after the general meeting. So if the members of the investment club online.
I don't know if it's over modulating or something. We're having a hard time understanding what you're saying. I think you're saying something about the investment club meeting after this meeting.
You hear me?
We can hear you, but it's on my sound. It's very difficult.
Hello.
Yeah. All right. That's better.
Dick, that's you. Art, try it one more time. Art. We're not hearing you at all now. All I can say is I think Art wants to have an investment club meeting after this meeting. So if you're in the investment club, stay on, and hopefully you'll be able to have a meeting. I won't cut off the meeting after we're done the regular meeting. I'm still looking for hands if there are any more questions, anything.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Who is it?
Okay.
I can hear someone, but
can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can hear someone, yes. Who are you? Who are you? I'm sorry. I cannot hear you. Anybody else? Hands up, or Bernie Epworth? I don't know who you are, but I'm going to recognize you.
Hi, I'm.
Go ahead.
I don't see anything to unmute here.
No, you're on. I can hear you.
Oh, you can. Good.
Yes.
I just wanted to Bernie Epworth from Jewish War Veterans. Mike Perloff's been asking me for a long time to come. I'm glad I came, and I hope to attend many more. This was an outstanding program, and I'm sure possibly Nelson was involved too. So thank you, both of you, for a delightful morning. It's good to be
Thank you.
with
We look forward to having you join us.
Happy to have you.
My pleasure.
Anyone else? Either raise your hand with the, I'm looking for Arlene Schuster, but it looks more like Bernie. Unmute yourself, Bernie. You're unmuted, Bernie.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You know, I wanted to ask a question, and I'm sure it's going to be inappropriate, but I figure I'm going to do it anyway. I'm very patriotic. I stood next to Eisenhower and lit the Christmas tree. But currently, with President Trump calling out the troops to do things that are so inappropriate and so dangerous and so unnecessary, if I was in the National Guard, I don't think I would show up. I mean, this is just dangerous, dangerous. And I see television all the time, and it just scares the hell out of me. I mean, when he disrupted the peaceful picketers in Washington, that was terrible. It reminded me what I read about Herbert Hoover, who shot at the war veterans from the First World War, and he called out MacArthur and Eisenhower to shoot the war veterans when they were picketing on Pennsylvania Boulevard, and shot quite a few of them and killed them. And that's the reason why we have, so much anger right now, is because you just can't do things like that. You can't break the Constitution. That's my comment. Thank you very much. And I thought this presentation was excellent.
Thanks, Bernie. Anyone else? I'm looking, I see no hands. No one? I'm going to cursor through one more time, see if anyone wants to speak. Okay, well, Mike Perloff. Go ahead, Mike, unmute yourself.
Yes, I think in the future, if we have people who are unable to have sound, like we had Stanley and Don, if they call you and you put them on speakerphone, we'll definitely be able to hear what they have to say.
Unfortunately, that didn't work. I tried Don on my speakerphone and he wasn't coming through loud enough for you to hear him.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but maybe in other
Try
in a difference. We're going to send Don for some classes, and hopefully he'll be better the next time. Anyway, gentlemen, have a great day. I think you probably all feel. I can't imagine that you don't feel like Jack Jacobs would be a great guy to have again. I mean, he obviously has a lot of stories and a lot of opinions. He's very well informed. I'd love to have him again. So
there's a hand up, by the way.
What's that?
Richard has his hand up.
Richard Dutkin?
No. But we'll take a look.
Richard, yeah, I see Richard. Richard, if you want to unmute yourself before we end the meeting. Dick?
Yeah. I know I had to leave for a minute or two, but my question is, we're now putting notice, as you know, we put a notice in the local the Jewish paper here.
The Voice?
The Voice, thank you. And we asked people who are interested to go on our website, and if so, they can then know about our upcoming meetings. And you might want to mention, are there any guests? And I don't know if that there was a gentleman that you spoke to that was not a member. I don't know, was he a guest?
I did mention about going on our website and leaving us a message. I also gave people my email address.
Okay, good.
So I think hopefully if there was anyone on that wants to join, they either know someone who is a member or will go on our website.
Right.
Okay. I think Art Korth came back again, and maybe we can hear him better. Art, if you want to unmute yourself, try it again. Art, no? I just saw him pop up. I guess not. I don't know.
Oh, there's David Singer. He's raising his hand.
Dave Singer, I see Richard Silver. Richard, you want to unmute yourself?
He's unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, there's an icon in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, of my screen, that says mute, and you can unmute it.
Right. Well, I think most people,
I unmute it, then it'll unmute. But you have to click that icon in the lower left-hand corner.
Right. Thank you. David Singer, if you will unmute yourself, sure, we'd love to hear from you. What are you doing? What are you doing in the hospital again?
Well, I just thought I'd bring everybody up to date. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Because you said, I want to tell you about Dave Singer, and just to that point, somebody called me and it knocked me out.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
So here's my story. Last Tuesday, I started not feeling well with a fever, and we were over in Pennsylvania at the bowling center. And so my fiance Elaine took me to Abington Hospital, where they found an infection in my blood. And on Friday, they did an MRI and discovered my gallbladder. So I actually have to have 2 procedures, one on Monday to endoscopy, knock one of the stones out, and then have the whole gallbladder removed on Tuesday. So many people have had it. Everybody tells me it's not a big problem. Now I got to worry for another 3 days.
Well, we all wish you well, and hopefully by the next meeting, you'll be out of there and recovering. Anyone else? Last chance. Art Korth again. Want to try it again, Art? Unmute yourself, please.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. I can hear you. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I switched laptops.
Okay.
As I was trying to say before, we're going to have an investment club meeting immediately following the general meeting. So if you want to participate, just stay online.
Okay. I'm going to take one last look and look for one more participant in case someone wants to say something. Then I'm going to leave the meeting, but I'll leave the meeting intact so that you can have your investment club meeting.